All right. Sorry I have to be out of town, but I thought since there was one of the lessons that I'm missing is going to be talking about the brushes, maybe the best thing for me to do was to just record the lesson that I would present to you, and it'll give you a chance to see how I play the brushes, and then perhaps Mr. Luck will have suggestions about systems he uses. One of the great things, but also confusing about brush playing, is that every player has a different setup. There isn't really a standard brush technique that every single person uses. And so I'm going to show you the two that I use all the time in the course of this class, but you can look on YouTube, you can go and talk to 10 different teachers, you're going to find 10 different variations on it. Brush players use all kinds of interesting patterns, some of which are sort of showmanship, some of which get interesting effects. But what I want to bring to you is a basic understanding of what the brushes are and what they sound like and how you would use them in a basic setting. First of all, let's just talk about what the brushes are. This is the brush. You can see I'm holding it up right here. This is a retractable drum brush, and if you push the end in. Here's the thing when it's closed. The way you get it out of the box, without twisting it. Don't twist this part right here, but just push it in like this, and it pushes the wire brushes out on the end of the other side. If you push it all the way out, you get a big wide fan that looks about like that. This is about the width of my hand. This brush surface is really nice on the drums. It sounds very light on a cymbal. It sounds really light and a little crisp on the snare drum, as opposed to a stick, which has a lot more punch. But the great thing about the brushes is not the way it sounds when you use it directly on the thing, but the fact that you run the brush across the drum head and you get this swish sound. That's what we call the swish. And I know drummers always have like the most practical names for things. So the fact that you are going across the drum is probably the main thing you have to get used to if you're learning how to play the brushes. What are the brushes used for? Well, they're used for slow tunes and ballads in jazz settings. That's the way people think of it most often. Medium swing, I'm going to show you the basic swing brush pattern today, which would be used for swing tunes. The same kind of songs that we've been using, that you've been practicing with and listening to, that you would play with sticks on the ride cymbal, playing the swing pattern, you can use brushes instead. And it's just a different texture. It is a little bit softer. It is a little bit less ringy. So a lot of times people ask for brushes when they want things soft. I do want to make the point that, as far as I'm concerned, they're just two different sounds, not softer and louder. The sticks can be played beautifully, very softly, and you get a nice clear attack with a stick. The brushes can be played quite energetically and really carry a full big band or even a symphony because of the sound you get out of them. So rather than thinking loud and soft, I just think about the two different sounds. One that is sort of ringy and has direct attacks like you get with a stick, or one that involves this swishing sound and the kind of feathered sound that you get from the brushes. One starting point to note, I was noting if you push the brush all the way out so that the little ring at the end comes all the way to the end, you get a fan that's fairly wide. I don't know if you can see that. I'm wearing a black shirt. There. But most drummers will pull that back and actually leave about a finger's width, that is the width of your finger, of space at the end of this thing. So if you notice, when you don't retract the brush all the way, it narrows the size of the brush. So there you can see it's a little bit smaller, not quite as wide, and a little more concentrated. And a width about like that is good. This is about the width of my finger, the brush width on the end. So that's a good size. If you have it all the way out, sometimes the little brush, the little strands of wire can get caught in things. Once in a while I want it like that. But more often than not, I'll play with the brush about like that. There's my finger. Okay? You want about 3 or 4 inches across the top here. So I've got my two brushes, and let me just play a little bit and give you an idea. First of all, the brushes are used for ballads, slow tunes. So in a jazz setting, and there are a couple of nice ballads posted on Canvas that are examples of the kind of playing you would use on a slow jazz ballad. In that case, you're going across the drum, and it's this kind of a sound. The right hand is just pumping quarter notes, and the left hand is just mirroring it. I'll show that pattern in the next lesson, but it is a slow, simple pattern to get together. And if you can imagine some ballad, let me think. My heart is sad and lonely. Might sigh for you, dear only. Okay, so that's what ballad brush playing sounds like, and that'll be in the next lesson. The one I want to show you today is a little bit closer to what we've already learned for swing, and that is this pattern, which is used for medium swing, meaning not very fast, and it's a nice crisp pattern that's used instead of sticks on the ride cymbal for swing. So you recall when we were playing swing with the sticks, we had the ride cymbal pattern that we learned. This one, right, with a hi-hat on 2 and 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, hopefully that's familiar to you. Now you can hear how it doesn't really project too well on the cymbal with brushes, although it's a nice sound, and sometimes I'll use it that way. But what we do with the brushes is we really play the time on the snare drum rather than the cymbals. It's a dry and crisp kind of a sound rather than a ringy sound. So I'm going to take the ride cymbal pattern that I've been doing with my right hand, and I'm just going to move it right over here to the snare drum and do the exact same thing that I was doing. In this case, my right hand isn't really moving across the drum like I was talking before. The right hand is just playing light attacks just like it was on the cymbal, right down into the drum. So my right hand's going to be playing the ride pattern. Hi-hat stays on 2 and 4. And here's what it sounds like without the left hand involved. We'll get to the left hand in a second. So 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay. One of the goals is to think about what we've talked about in terms of what that ride cymbal pattern is supposed to sound like when you're playing it with sticks, and bring all that same shape and character down to the drum. So we talk about a stream of quarter notes, which is what the bass player wants to hear. I need to have that same consistent stream of quarter notes coming out of the snare drum. Talking about placing the swung upbeat so that it's going dun, ga, dun, ga, dun, ga, dun, go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3. So I need to bring that same swung feel down here. And the shape, the accent on 2 and 4 that lines up with the hi-hat, and then the other two notes being sort of like echoes of that 2 and 4. So you've got 1, 2 and 3. 4 and 1, 2 and 3. That's the shape you want. It's the same as what we had here. Now it's down here. Somehow there can be a temptation to stiffen up a little bit when we play the brushes on the snare drum. Maybe it's because you don't get as much of a bounce back. When you play a cymbal with a stick, the cymbal kicks the stick right back at you. But with a brush on the snare drum, you drop it, you don't get much bounce back, a little bit. So you really have to use your fingers. This same business that we've talked about all semester, having this fulcrum on your thumb and your first finger and letting your back 3 fingers drive the stick, or in this case the brush from the back, starts to be really important. You have to have this movement. If you're trying to play the brushes like this, where you're really crunching down and not letting much room, not allow any room in the palm, and you're trying to play it from the wrist, it really doesn't work very well because there's no kickback, so you're really stuck. If you have aspects about your time playing on the ride cymbal that are not so great, sometimes with a stick you can get away with it, or the ear doesn't grab it so fast because the cymbal is ringing and there's a lot of noise. Well, not noise, but in any case it's ringing. That tends to cover it up. One of the things that happens when you go down to the snare drum is it's real dry. So if the ride pattern isn't happening, isn't swinging down here, probably it wasn't swinging too well up here, and this is just a chance for you to really fine-tune it. if you work on your ride pattern on the brushes and you really get it sounding good, when you go back to play sticks on the ride cymbal, I guarantee you there'll be a little bit more conviction here and a little more of a time feel with the sticks. So, my point is that I need to stay loose. I can't let myself get stiff. I've got a 2 and 4 pulse that out of my arm, right along with the hi-hat. You can see it when I play the brushes. I'm not even playing right now, but that motion in the arm brings out that 2 and 4, and then the softer notes that come after 2 and 4 are mainly done in the fingers. And everything is loose. My wrist is loose, my elbows are loose, my shoulders. I'm not carrying any tension. I'm not sitting with my shoulders up or anything. I'm not going to go into some weird position. People do all kinds of strange things. They try to get sideways or they go out like this. You should be sitting in the most relaxed position you can. You should be sitting like you would if you just dropped your hands and you were waiting for somebody to bring you some food. Like this is your table. You're just like that, okay? That's where you want to be, because then you're not burning any energy holding your arm in any position. And when you want your muscles to work for you, they're there because they're relaxed. So here's that ride pattern again, now that we've talked about it a little bit, and I want you to notice some of the characteristics about it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay? That's a nice, settled feel. Now, you may be asking yourself, because you can't ask me because I'm on tape, but you probably would. As a matter of fact, I see somebody in the back who's just about to ask, what goes on with the left hand? All right, well, in this pattern, the hands do 2 different purposes. The right hand takes the ride cymbal pattern and moves it over here, but we're missing that swish thing that I was talking about. So that's what the left hand is going to do. And this works either way, whether you're playing matched, in which case you have this kind of a motion happening, very straightforward, or if you're playing traditional, your grip remains the same, but in all cases, you're going to be doing some kind of a circular motion that brings out that swish. The pattern that I'm going to show you, and it's on this sheet, which is called Basic Swing Jazz Brush Pattern. There's a little diagram on here, and I'll have it there for Mr. Luck to pass out to you. The left hand is going to do a circle that repeats every 2 beats. And for me, I like a counterclockwise circle, and it's actually kind of more like an oval, so that I'm swirling my left hand like this, kind of over on the left side of the drum, so my right hand is staying over on the right side of the drum and just playing the time pattern we had. The left hand is going to do this oval. And 2 and 4 end up being up here towards the top of the drum. The way I think about it is that I want to have it be somewhere right up here every time the hi-hat plays, so that the hi-hat and my left hand are kind of next to each other when they play. So here's my main pattern, okay, with the counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to add the left hand. 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's my left hand. There's a lot to be said about the left hand, but the one thing I want you to notice first is that it's not just going around randomly. I'm keeping a circle that repeats every 2 beats. And every time the hi-hat plays, the left hand is kind of right up there by it. I'm trying to make my circle continuous. I'm never breaking them. And when I turn the corner to come back, I don't go up and stop and come back. Because if you do, you get this sound. Okay, it has to be circular. You got to move it. So when you get up towards the top, you turn around the bend. All right. It takes a little while to get used to that, but part of what makes it work is that every joint in your arm is as loose as it could possibly be. My wrist is just like a hinge. It's just like a floppy weight at the end of my arm, and I keep it that way. I'm not going to stiffen it up and drive it around like this. If I try to really get stiff with my wrist, you can hear that even then it doesn't feel quite as fluid. If I allow my wrist to flop a little bit as I move, it smooths it out, okay? Notice that the swish motion is not so much from the fingers or the hand. The swish motion is really coming from the shoulders and the elbows. I feel the swish motion, that circle that I'm doing, way up here in my shoulder, maybe even between my shoulder blades I can feel it. But it's definitely an arm-related motion, right down through the wrist and everything else. So if you're down here and you're doing it really teeny, or you're trying to just do it in your fingers, that's not going to quite get you enough sound. The more ground you cover on the snare drum, the fuller the sound of that swish is going to be. So you want to try to get used to feeling it way up in your shoulder. As far as the fingers go, first of all, I'm not going to put any weight on the brush when I'm doing the swish motion. The swish motion should be like skating across an ice rink or something. It's just like this. I'm just letting the very, very edge of the front of the brush ride along the snare drum, and I'm not pushing down. If you look and you see that the brush is curving and kind of getting mushed into the head, that means you're allowing weight to lean on that brush, and it makes it sounds choked, as opposed to when you really suspend the weight of your arm. I always feel kind of like I've got a rope, or a little like I'm a marionette, and I'm just sort of skating above, and there's no weight being put on this brush. So you get this very light sound. The other really important thing is that unlike a stick where this grip, I'm telling you that you need to have a pretty strong grip between your thumb and your first finger, and the stick you're trying to hold it really in place. With a brush, you have to dial that back a little bit and use as light a grip with your thumb and your first finger as you possibly can, and still keep control of the brush. The idea is that with a stick, I don't want the stick to move sideways. I want to keep it straight. But with a brush, I want this to happen. Can you see what I'm doing there? My hand is not moving, but the brush is moving in my fingers. So if I'm really cranked down right here on my thumb, the brush is going to go like this. It's going to stay in line. But if I allow this thumb to just lighten up, so it's like turning a dial. I'm going to back off until the brush has this lateral motion that it can do. You can even see it in the air. You can really see it on the drum. Do you see that? How as I move my hand, the brush kind of gets behind it, and then it has to catch up. As opposed to this. Do you see the difference? Here the brush is absolutely stiff. I'm cranking down with my finger. If I lighten up with my thumb, now I have the ability for it to move in there. And if you're doing it right, you can see the back of the brush moving in your palm, back and forth like this. That lateral motion out of your brush swishing hand allows those corners to be rounded off. It's like spreading frosting. If you've ever frosted a cake and you just want to round off that edge and come back, that's the feeling you want to have. It's this curvy thing. It's sort of I don't know, come up with an analogy. It's like water or something. Fluid is a great way to think about it. My wrist is loose, so I'm not going to grip down super hard on this. And you have to play around with it a little bit. If I could play the brushes without my thumb on there at all, it would be great. But it really is kind of out of control. You know, the brush is going to fall out of my hand. So I have to have the thumb on there a little bit. If I play the brushes and I really crank down, I get this sound. It's like I'm sanding a wall and getting ready for painting, which I'm not doing. I want it to be fluid. So I've got to experiment around with how much pressure am I putting with this thumb and try to do as light as possible. And you come to that point where it feels light, but the brush is able to move. So these are the things to think about. Now, on the left hand is going across. All your thought is horizontal. It's all across, not down into the drum. So in this pattern, you've got a little bit of that thing where you're sort of, let's see, my left hand is doing this and my right hand is doing that, right? It's a little bit of that. Put the two things together and you get a nice full sounding swish that just rolls through the whole thing, and then embedded down in there is the ride cymbal pattern, and the hi-hat helps us. So this is what the thing sounds like if I put the two together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, for those of you who are a teeny bit more advanced, one of the things you'll notice is that even if you try to smooth it out as much as possible, there's still going to be a shape to that circle in the left hand. It's going to go, just even if you really round off every curve, there's going to be a little bit of that just because of the way you're moving. So there's a natural emphasis. All right? I'm not pushing down to make that sound. So I think, wow, I want to make that sound be part of the groove. I'm sort of treating it like a little accent. Maybe I want to put it right in between the empty space in the ride pattern. So the ride pattern goes 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1. So I'm putting the little shove that's natural in here. I'm timing it so that that comes right in between the empty space. What is that? The and of 1 and the and of 3. Da, 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 da. And it becomes part of the groove. The other place you can put it easily is right on 2 and 4. All right? And hopefully you can hear the difference there. But that little shape in there ends up bringing color to the groove. Or So if you're somebody who's played a little bit of brushes, or you're getting good at it after you've practiced a little bit, that's one of the things you can start thinking about. What I really want you, at the very basic level, I want you to make sure that this left-hand swish is not just random. It shouldn't just be kind of swirling around with no connection to the ride pattern. If it does that, there's just this funny disconnected feel. It doesn't, the swish doesn't feel like it belongs. The other thing is, make sure you cover as much ground as you can with the left hand. The temptation, if it's new to you, is to make your swish like this. And, because it feels funny to move that much. But as you can hear, what you get from that is really just that the swish is very, very diminished and it doesn't really stand out. There are times when that's the sound that I'd like. Sometimes I'm working with somebody where I just, because of the room or whatever's going on, I actually want a lighter swish, in which case I will cover less ground by decision. But the place I want to start is covering a lot of ground, so I've got a nice full swish. You can always back off. I'm taking the brush all the way up to the rim, up around 11 o'clock on the clock on the drum, and I'm bringing it all the way down here towards the edge of this rim on the bottom of that oval, so that it's down here around, what is that, 7. So to practice this, well, all right, you need to spend a little bit of time just getting your right hand going with the hi-hat in there. That shouldn't take too long because you've already got that pattern happening. But it's a good idea to just settle with feeling how the brush is and how it responds and what the sound is. Maybe play through one of the medium swing tunes that are on canvas. And by the way, if you're playing along with brushes and trying to learn how to play brushes, you don't have to play along with the track where the drummer is playing brushes. Sometimes it's actually better to play along with one where the drummer on the track is playing sticks on the ride cymbal, because you can really hear the ride cymbal pattern as you're playing the brushes, and you can remind yourself that you're trying to get that same shape from the brushes. So it's really actually okay to grab one of those tracks that you've already used. The basic brush pattern tracks that I have posted, some of them are very slow. They're like ballads. So you might find that working from the basic swing tracks that are posted would be better. In any case, maybe one time through a tune, when you sit down to practice and you've got your tracks ready to go, one time through a song where you really let your left hand just lay out and you just try to get used to playing the ride pattern on the snare drum and thinking about the shape and the feel of it. Then after you've gone through that, you can go through the song a second time, and this time, now that this is locked down just a little bit and you're sort of familiar with it, now see if you can figure out how to bring your left hand in. You might have to do it really slow out of time to just get the timing for your left hand together and figure out how to do swish with one hand and attacks with the other. I find that it's helpful usually to keep the hi-hat involved because the hi-hat ends up being a guide. I know that my right hand and my hi-hat are going to come together on 2 and 4 all the time. So that was not very good. There, that's better. They should really sound like one. And if you hear blah, if you hear a flam between them, then you need to listen to those two and get them lined up together. And the hi-hat is a guide for your left hand too, because as I'm trying to figure out how to guide this circle and how to make this happen, and what speed do I have to move to keep coming around every time and have it be 2 beats, I can just remember that my left hand wants to be up here in the left corner, right around 11 o'clock on the drum, at the same time the hi-hat plays. So that can help to lock in a little bit. Let me just play a little bit of brushes using this basic pattern. There are other accents that get thrown in. Sometimes you do want to crunch down and put a little bit of weight on the brush so you get a little bit of a shove sound. Once in a while, I'll turn my hand, angle it a little bit so you shove the brush into the head a little bit. There are all kinds of effects, including putting enough push on it that you actually direct the hard part of the brush into the drum or forward. There are also there are effects people do this business, which I can really only do with my right hand. My left hand, after all these years, my right hand is better. Jeff Hamilton can do it with either hand, so good for him. So here's a little bit of brush time, just to give you an idea of how it all sounds if you add a few little fills and play a little bit. Let's just imagine this is a blues. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I started the wrong pattern. Here we go. That's what it should sound like. So, this is something to get you started with the brushes. The brushes are one of my most favorite kind of playing. We tend to, again, like I said, people tend to ask for them when they want things soft. But if you get some of the more advanced techniques together with the brushes, they're useful for a million great things. Not just light swing or balance, but you can use it for instance, playing samba beats. Or even rock stuff. Okay, so the brushes are super useful, and they're, rather than thinking of them as just a softer way to play, think of them as just another color. In the next lesson, I'm going to be talking about the ballad brush pattern, which I will have a sheet for you, and it'll be next week, and it'll be a chance for you to get both hands swishing. All right, hope this has been useful. And now I gotta teach.